you look with your physical sight. Are you with me? You look with what? Your physical what? Sight. But you see with what? Your mind. Our objective today is to examine the essence and impact of transitions of life on the decisions we make and the choices we make in life. This is key. We want to examine the essence, in other words, the importance and the impact of the transitions of life. And I'm sure somebody is asking, what is transitions? Or what are transitions of life? And how do these things impact on our decisions and the choices we make in life? The topic was carefully selected because whether or not you are going to make it in life, they are a function of the decisions you make, which is also part of the choices we make. Okay? Choices we make in life. And we want to understand, how does transitions in life impact on these things? So let me ask the question. When you hear the word transitions, what comes to mind? Now, that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. What does it mean to go through transitions? Okay? Now, have you heard the word regret before? Regret. When you hear the word regret, what comes to mind? In other words, there are some things that you are going to discover that you wish you knew them before you go to a certain level. My first book I wrote is titled, What I Wish I Knew Before the Age of 20. In life, every adult will tell you that there are some things they wish they knew earlier. Why? Because if they knew them, they wouldn't have made the mistake that they made. So there are certain basic things that I believe that people under 50 need to understand. And when you know them, you will never become a product of the environment. Let me explain what I've just said. A product of the environment are people who think that government or the system owes them something. And therefore they live their lives expecting what they call hand-me-down. Are we together? Now, if you know these things, you avoid repeating them. Let's focus on you. Let's focus on you. And the focusing is going to be in the form of a question. How many of you have had a written down life goals? You have a written down life goals. Okay, so the second one is now on a scale of 1 to 10. I want you to now score yourself. How are you doing? I'm going to give you time to do that. I'm sure you have your goals either in your mind or somewhere in your book or whatever. I'm going to give you time to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How are you doing? Do that now. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you score yourself? Alright, so then what has been the biggest challenge that has drawn you back or that has not made you shift forward? Do you know them? Have you identified those challenges? It's always good to know the challenges, okay? Now, the question, which is the critical one which has brought us here. Are you willing to change the results of your life? Because if you have a scorecard, and 10 is the highest, and you are not there yet, the question is, are you willing to put in all the effort to change the results? And you come to appreciate that life is about results. If you don't change your results, you remain where you are. You plateau. And that is what we want to avoid. Okay? So I'm going to give you just a few minutes, and I want you to write down about 3 or 4 challenges that you can identify that is preventing you from scoring yourself higher, or that is preventing you from achieving a much higher result in your life goal that you have written. Is that okay? 4 challenges. I want you to do 4 challenges. All right. So there's a man by name Soren Kierkegaard. He's a Danish theologian and a philosopher. He's made a very important statement. He said, life can only be understood by looking backward, but it must be lived forward, looking forward. Life can only be understood by looking backward, but it must be lived forward. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? How many of you have ever spoken to somebody who is blind or what we call visually impaired or challenged individual? And as you keep talking to the person says, "Oh, I see." Have you ever had that encounter before? Where you're talking to somebody who is visually challenged, a blind guy, like we call him. And then as you keep talking to the person, you're having a conversation, you say, "Oh, I see." Now the question you must ask yourself is, what does a blind person see? Or let me ask the question this way. Do you think blind people see? Let me say this to you guys. Every blind person can see, except that they cannot look. So, you come to appreciate that there is a difference between looking and seeing. Looking and what? Seeing. You look with your physical sight. Are you with me? You look with what? Your physical what? Sight. But you see with what? Your mind. That's why when you're talking to a blind person, he can say, "Oh, I see." Now, if you look at your life, there are some things that happen to you at the time the thing did take place. You couldn't understand it. But 2 years later, or maybe a month later, when you look back, you say, "Oh, now I understand why what happened." Are we together? Now, that is what Soren is saying, that life is best understood looking backward. So when I look backward and I'm able to tell, now again, a deeper insight as to why the thing that happened to me at that time did happen, I am able to now understand life looking forward. In other words, if I don't learn from my mistakes, my past mistakes, I will keep repeating them. And the more I repeat them, the worse I become. We're talking about life transitions. Now, somebody made a statement, he said, any life that is not worth examining is not worth living. So, if you are, let's say, 20 years, and you are still repeating the experiences of 15 years, at the age of 20, which is not productive, it means you have not learned from your previous experiences. So, if you really want to understand life, look backward. I am where I am today because I learned from the past and I decided I wasn't going to repeat what happened in the past. Then I've understood life. That's exactly what he's saying. Now let's look at the transitions of life. And I'm going to show you that life is divided into 3 phases. The first phase of life is, now, so we're looking at life in terms of years and growth stage. The first phase of life is from age 0 to 25. We call it the preparatory stage. Every human being from age 0 to 25, we call it now laying the foundation for takeoff. Lay the foundation for takeoff. That is when you are now learning the principles that will help you to build the foundation for your life. Then from age 0 to 25, you move on to what we call the working life, which is from 26 to 59. That is why whenever you finish university, they expect you to start looking for a job. Okay? Why? Because you would have acquired the principles that you needed to be able to now start the foundational journey for your life. So between 26 and 59, you start working, you become an adult. And from adulthood, you become mature. Are we together? That's the second phase of life. Then you move on to what we call the retirement stage, which is the old age. So these are the three phases of life. Now, from every phase, you transit to the next phase. You get it? You transit from preparatory stage to the working and adult stage. Then you move on to the retirement stage. Now, the point is that if the lessons that ought to be learned at the preparatory stage are not mastered, when you move on to the next phase, you lose out. Because every transition has certain basic requirements and certain principles. And when you don't master the principles and the requirements of a certain phase, you cannot master the next phase. And for many people, not only do they fail to master the principles and the foundational and the principles and the processes of a particular phase, even when they move to the next phase, they are still repeating the phases where they have left. Chronologically, they have grown from age whatever to whatever age, but experience-wise, they are not matured. So I always tell people there's a difference between growth and maturity. Very important. You can grow chronologically. So you move from one phase to the other chronologically. But in terms of maturity, you're supposed to master the processes and the principles of each phase. When we come to the paradigm, we understand why this is so crucial. Because if mentally, you grow by growing anatomically, by your anatomically, if you grow, but mentally you are not maturing, you lose out on the principles of the transitions. Are we together? It is so important. That's why Soren said, life is best understood looking backward, but it must be lived looking forward. Why? For me to know whether I am maturing, I must gauge my growth process. What transition did what period did I transit to the next period? What lessons did I pick up? And how are these lessons helping me to mature in the next phase? This is key. Success is predictable. And failure is predictable. Please write that statement down. It will help you one day. Success is predictable. And failure is also predictable. Why? If I look at somebody who has gone ahead of me by way of transition, and I look at the principles and the processes that he ought to have learned and mastered, which he did not master and learn, but he has gotten to the next transitional phase and repeating the same principles that he ought to have left. If I repeat the same thing, I'm going to fall in the same trap. Very, very important. There are some learnings. If you miss out on a particular transition, you cannot master the processes of the next transition. And that's a fact. Let me give a very practical example. You're a young lady, you want to marry. You don't get married before you learn how to be a wife. You learn them before you become a wife. So, anatomically, you are a woman, but to be a wife, which is a transition, that's two different things. You want to be a father. Becoming a man is different, but to become a father is different. It's a transition, which needs to be mastered. When I was a child, this is Paul speaking, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child does. Think about it. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now, that statement is so potent. That means you can grow chronologically and still carry on childish things that were characteristic of a particular transitional phase. So you can move What it means is that you can move from this stage, which is the growth stage. You can move from this stage to that stage, but still carry the characteristics of this stage. Are we together? And once you do that, then you're going to miss out on some of the things that you ought to have mastered as you grow along. And there are many people who have moved from this stage, sometimes even to the maturity stage, but they are still carrying what we call childish things. Because they couldn't master the processes that is supposed to be mastered. So, Paul said, when I was a child, when I was at the preparatory stage, I operated based on the characteristics of the preparatory stage. But when I moved on to the maturity and the adult stage, I had to let go of some of the things that were characteristics of the childish level. Why? If I don't, then I cannot mature. What does this mean? Look at this diagram here. I love to use this diagram. This is a butterfly. A butterfly goes through certain stages before you can fly as a butterfly. He starts as an egg. Here. Then from the egg stage, he becomes what? A larva or a caterpillar. So he starts developing, look at the characteristics, developing some stuff which you can't see here. Now, you discover that when you move from an egg stage to the caterpillar stage, there's a movement that is taking place now. However, if this larva or this caterpillar refuses to allow those external, features to become visible, he will be at the larva stage, but he will still be operating like an egg. And then when he moves from here, he transforms into what we call a pupa. That's why he starts developing some sort of, the wings and stuff like that. Then it becomes a butterfly. The point I'm trying to make is that each of these stages comes with different characteristics. The same applies to us as human beings. Every transitional stage has its own characteristics. And for many people, because we are not aware of these kind of things, we start and we operate based on what we learned from our childhood experiences, and we carry them along. When you do that, in this age and era, you're going to struggle.